The message came at the worst possible moment. Ambassador Dongwu was sitting in the Grand Council chambers, listening to the Althari delegate complain about human trade policies, when his personal communicator buzzed. The small device rarely made noise during official sessions. When it did, it meant something serious had happened. Dongwu glanced at the screen and felt his blood turn cold. The message was short and came from Admiral Bo-Ram herself. Project Silent Dawn. Execute. Immediately. All humans return home now. No exceptions. He had hoped this day would never come. For months, human intelligence had been watching the other species in the Galactic Council. They had suspected something was wrong, but everyone had hoped they were being paranoid. Apparently, they were not paranoid enough. 3 days earlier, Captain Hyun-soo had been running a routine patrol near the outer rim when his ship's sensors picked up strange transmissions. The signals were encrypted, but human technology was better than most species realized. What they found inside those messages changed everything. The 7 major council races had been working together in secret. They had been sabotaging human colonies for years, making it look like accidents. They stole human technology and sold it to pirates. Worst of all, they were planning to frame humanity for war crimes against the peaceful Malari people. The evidence was clear and detailed. The other species wanted humans gone, and they were willing to lie and kill to make it happen. Captain Hyun-soo had immediately sent the information to human intelligence. Within hours, it was on Admiral Bo-Ram's desk. She had called an emergency meeting of all human leaders. They met on the massive station called New Seoul, which served as the center of human diplomatic operations. The meeting room was full of the most important humans in the galaxy. Fleet Commander Taemin stood at the front, showing holographic displays of the intercepted messages. Intelligence Director Ha-eun explained what each message meant and how long the conspiracy had been going on. The evidence was overwhelming and heartbreaking. "They've been planning this for 5 years, Ha-eun said, her voice steady but her eyes showing anger. "Every trade agreement, every defense pact, every research project we've worked on together, they've been using it all against us." Admiral Bo-Ram looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Some looked angry, others looked sad, but all of them looked determined. "We have 3 choices," she said. "We can fight them, we can try to expose them, or we can leave." "If we fight, millions will die," said Fleet Commander Taemin. "Our ships are good, but we're outnumbered 7-1. If we try to expose them, they'll just claim we're lying," added Ha-eun. "They control most of the council now. They can make any evidence look fake." Admiral Bo-Ram nodded. "That leaves option 3. We go home, all of us. Right now." The decision was not easy, but it was unanimous. Humanity would leave the galactic community completely. No warnings, no explanations, no long goodbyes. They would just disappear. What happened next was the largest and most coordinated evacuation in galactic history. Every human ship, station, and settlement received the same message that Dongwu had gotten. Within hours, the evacuation began. Human families packed their belongings and boarded transport ships. Scientists abandoned their research projects, leaving labs full of half-finished experiments. Merchants canceled their contracts and called their ships home. Soldiers left their posts without saying why. The other species watched in confusion, as humans simply walked away from everything. Trade negotiations that had been going on for months were abandoned mid-sentence. Defense agreements that protected dozens of worlds were canceled without explanation. Research stations that had been studying the galaxy's mysteries for decades went dark. Ambassador Dongwu had one last job to do. He walked to the center of the council chambers and placed a small data chip on the speaker's podium. The chip contained all the evidence of the conspiracy, every intercepted message, every piece of proof that showed what the other species had been planning. "This contains the truth," Dongwu said quietly. "When you're ready to face it, you know where to find us." Then he walked out. He didn't look back, didn't answer the questions that the other delegates shouted after him, didn't try to explain what was happening. He just left. The evacuation took 3 days. During those 3 days, the galaxy watched in amazement as humanity's vast network simply vanished. Trade routes that had been busy for decades became empty. Communication networks that had connected hundreds of worlds went silent. Research facilities that had been making breakthrough discoveries every month suddenly shut down. On the third day, something even more surprising happened. The humans activated technology that no other species had ever seen before. A barrier appeared around all of human space. Not a physical wall, but something that made it impossible for other ships to enter human territory. Any vessel that tried to cross the boundary would find its system shutting down, forcing it to turn back. The barrier wasn't violent or destructive. It was just absolute. It said, very clearly, "You are not welcome here anymore." Captain Hyun-soo was one of the last humans to cross back into protected space. He looked back at the galaxy they were leaving behind and felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because humans had genuinely wanted to be part of the galactic community. Relief because they would never again have to wonder which of their friends were really their enemies. As his ship crossed the barrier, Hyun-soo received a message from Admiral Bo-ram. "Phase 1 complete," it said. "Beginning Phase 2. Prepare for long-term isolation." The other species had wanted humanity gone. Now they had their wish. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, they would begin to understand what they had really lost. Humanity had not just been another member of the galactic community. They had been the foundation that held everything together, and now they were gone, taking their knowledge, their technology, and their protection with them. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about the difference between getting what you want and getting what you need, but humanity would not be there to teach them. They had tried teaching once already, and it had nearly gotten them destroyed. This time, the other species would have to learn on their own. Council Chairman Vextar of the Althari people stood in the great meeting hall and smiled. The massive chamber felt bigger now that the human section was empty. Their chairs sat vacant, covered in dust sheets like furniture in an abandoned house. "Good riddance," Vextar said to the other council leaders. "Finally, we can run the galaxy the way it should be run." The other species nodded in agreement. The Kelroni representative, a tall creature with blue skin and sharp teeth, laughed. "They were always telling us what to do. Now we can make our own decisions." The Bratak delegate, whose people were known for their military strength, crossed his forearms with satisfaction. Their so-called moral guidance was just another form of control. We're better off without them. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. The council races divided up the trade routes that humans had controlled. They took over the research facilities that humans had built. They claimed the territories that humans had protected. It felt like they had won a great victory without having to fight a war. But then small problems started to appear. The first sign was in the medical centers. Dr. Jin Ho had been the lead researcher on dozens of medical projects. His team had developed treatments for diseases that affected multiple species. But when the doctors tried to use these treatments, they stopped working properly. "It's strange," said Dr. Kilana, a Yilani physician. "The medicine worked perfectly last month. Now it barely helps at all." What she didn't know was that human medical technology had built-in security features. When Dr. Jinho's team left, they took their access codes with them. Without those codes, the medicines slowly became less effective. Within 6 months, they would be completely useless. The same thing was happening with human technology all across the galaxy. Computer systems that humans had designed started having problems. The quantum processors that powered interstellar communication began failing. Energy converters that had been working for decades suddenly needed constant repairs. The council races tried to fix these problems, but human technology was more advanced than they had realized. It was like trying to repair a complex machine when you only understood half of how it worked. "We'll figure it out," Vextar announced confidently. "Humans aren't the only smart species in the galaxy." But the problems kept getting worse. Trade routes that humans had maintained started becoming dangerous. Pirates attacked merchant ships that had been safe for years. The space lanes that connected different star systems began to fill with debris. and hazards that no one was clearing away. More troubling were the reports coming from the outer regions of the galaxy. There was something called the Screaming Void, a region of space that seemed to eat energy and matter. For decades, human ships had been patrolling its borders, keeping it contained. Now those ships were gone, and the void was starting to grow. The first system it consumed was uninhabited, so most people didn't worry about it. The second system had a small mining colony. The third had over 1 million people. "This is a temporary problem," the Bratak military commander insisted. "We'll send our own ships to contain it." But when Bratak warships approached the Screaming Void, they simply vanished. Not destroyed, just gone, as if they had never existed at all. The most shocking discovery came when the Kelroni tried to claim former human territory. Their massive fleet approached the barrier around human space, confident that their superior numbers would overcome whatever defenses humanity had left behind. Admiral Korthak of the Kelroni led the fleet personally. He was a proud warrior who had conquered dozens of worlds. He expected the humans to either surrender or put up a brave but hopeless fight. Instead, something impossible happened. As soon as the Kelroni ships crossed into human territory, they simply stopped working. Not damaged, not destroyed, just completely powerless. The engines shut down, the weapons went offline, the life support systems reduced to minimum power. The ships drifted helplessly in space until automated human vessels approached them. These ships had no visible crews, but they gently pushed the Kelroni fleet back across the border. As soon as the ships left human space, their systems came back online. The only message they received was displayed on every screen in the fleet. Written in perfect Kelroni language, "You are no longer welcome here." Admiral Korthak was furious but also confused. He had never seen technology that could disable ships without damaging them. More importantly, he had never encountered defenses that showed such perfect restraint. The humans could have destroyed the entire fleet easily, but they chose to simply send them away. Back in the council chambers, the leaders were starting to realize they had made a terrible mistake. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Food production was failing on worlds that used human-developed crops. Energy systems were breaking down on stations that relied on human technology. Medical treatments were becoming ineffective in hospitals that had depended on human research. "How did they do so much?" asked the Gethry representative, her voice full of worry. "We thought they were just another member species." Intelligence Director Yelandra of the Althari had been studying the problem for months. Her report was frightening. "They weren't just members," she said, "they were the foundation. Everything we built, every system we relied on had human technology or human knowledge at its core. The council races had thought they were removing a rival. Instead, they had destroyed the support structure that kept galactic civilization running." Vextar refused to admit the truth. "We can rebuild," he said. "We can develop our own technology. We don't need humans." But privately, he was beginning to panic. The Althari homeworld was experiencing power failures. Their communication networks were failing. Their medical systems were collapsing. All because they had lost access to human knowledge and human technology, the Urath. Other council races were facing similar problems. The proud Bratak military was struggling to keep their ships running. The Yelani Medical Federation was watching diseases they couldn't cure spread across their territory. The Kelroni trade empire was collapsing as their transport systems failed. 1 year after humanity's departure, the galaxy was falling apart. The council races had gotten exactly what they wanted, a galaxy without human influence. But they had also gotten something they never expected, a galaxy that couldn't function without human help. The worst part was the growing realization that humanity had known this would happen. They had built their technology and shared their knowledge in a way that made the galaxy dependent on them, not as conquerors or rulers, but as the invisible foundation that held everything together. And now they were gone, watching from behind. Their impenetrable barrier as the civilization they had helped build slowly crumbled to dust. 2 years had passed since humanity disappeared, and the galaxy was dying. The Bratak hegemony was the first major power to collapse completely. Their massive military machines, which had conquered dozens of worlds, sat silent in their shipyards. The energy converters that powered their weapons had been designed by human engineers. Without maintenance codes and replacement parts, the converters had failed one by one. Commander Grixtal stood in the ruins of the Bratak Command Center, looking at screens that showed nothing but static. His proud warrior people were fighting each other with primitive weapons because their advanced technology no longer worked. 3 separate Bratak factions claimed to be the true government, and civil war had torn their empire apart. How did we become so dependent on them? Grixtal asked his aide. We conquered worlds before we ever met humans. The aide had no answer. The truth was that human technology had slowly replaced Bratak systems over decades of cooperation. It happened so gradually that no one noticed until it was too late. The Yilani were facing an even worse crisis. Their entire civilization was built around medical knowledge and healing. They were the galaxy's doctors, the species that other races came to when disease threatened their worlds. But now they were helpless against a plague that was spreading through their territory. Dr. Silana stood in her laboratory, surrounded by equipment that no longer worked properly. The disease was something they had never seen before, a virus that seemed to attack the immune system itself. In the past, she would have contacted Dr. Jinho and his human research team. Together, they could have developed a cure in weeks. Now, Dr. Jinho was gone, along with all his knowledge and resources. The Yilani were watching their people die from a disease that human science could have cured easily. We were fools, Dr. Silana whispered to herself. We thought we were the galaxy's greatest healers, but we were just assistants. The humans were doing the real work. But the worst crisis was happening in space itself. The screaming void, which had been contained for 50 years, was growing at an alarming rate. Every month it consumed more star systems, turning matter and energy into nothingness. Captain Wayrock of the Gethry Defense Force watched helplessly as the void approached his homeworld. His people had always lived on the edge of the galaxy, in a region that most species considered too dangerous to inhabit. But the Gethry had survived because human monitoring stations had watched the void and warned them when it shifted or grew. Those stations were gone now, and the Gethry were blind to the approaching disaster. How long do we have? Wayrock asked, his science officer. 6 months, maybe less, came the reply. The void is expanding faster than our models predicted. Without the human data, we can't calculate its exact path. The Gethry had tried to evacuate their homeworld, but they had nowhere to go. Other species were too busy dealing with their own problems to help refugees. The proud galactic community that had once promised mutual aid had become a collection of struggling, isolated worlds. Meanwhile, Council Chairman Vexitar was dealing with rebellions across the galaxy. Species that had been suppressed by the Council races were rising up, inspired by the collapse of their oppressors' technology. The Althari military, which had maintained order through superior weapons, found their ships failing at the worst possible moments. The breaking point came when the Malari people revealed the truth about the conspiracy. Elder Threnos of the Q. Mallory appeared on every communication channel in the galaxy, broadcasting a message that changed everything. We have kept silent for too long, Threnos said, his gentle voice carrying across space. The Council races told you that humans planned to commit war crimes against our people. This was a lie. Humans were our closest allies. They protected us from those who would have enslaved us. The broadcast included evidence that the Malari had gathered over years of careful investigation. It showed how the Council races had fabricated the war crimes allegations. It revealed how they had stolen human technology and used it to oppress smaller species. Most damning of all, it proved that the humans had known about the conspiracy and chosen to leave rather than fight. Humans could have destroyed the Council fleets, Threnos explained. Their technology was far more advanced than any of us realized. Instead, they chose to walk away and let you face the consequences of your betrayal. The revelation triggered revolts across the galaxy. Species that had been ruled by the Council races declared independence. Pirates and rebels attacked weakened. Governments. Trade routes became battlegrounds as different factions fought for control. On the Althari homeworld, Vextar sat in his empty palace as riots raged in the streets outside. His communication systems were failing, his security forces were deserting, and his government was collapsing around him. "Contact the humans," he ordered his aide. "Tell them we're sorry. Tell them we'll give them anything they want if they come back." The aide tried to send messages to human space, but there was no response. The barrier around human territory remained impenetrable. Human monitoring stations detected the messages, but sent back only automated replies. "Your message has been recorded. No further communication is necessary." As the months passed, different species made their own attempts to contact humanity. The Kelroni offered their entire fleet as tribute. The Yilani promised to serve as humanity's personal medical staff. The Bratak clans offered to become human vassals in exchange for help rebuilding their civilization. All received the same cold, automated response. The most desperate attempt came from the Gethri, whose homeworld was now only weeks away from being consumed by the screaming void. Their empress, Zara Lynn, personally piloted a small ship to the edge of human space. To everyone's surprise, the barrier allowed her through. But when her ship crossed into human territory, she found only empty space where human colonies had once thrived. The worlds were there, but they were uninhabited. The cities were dark, the orbital stations were abandoned, the shipyards were empty. In the center of what had once been humanity's capital system, Zara Lynn found a single automated beacon broadcasting a message from Admiral So Young. "We are no longer here to clean up the messes of those who betrayed us. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences." The message was clear. Humanity hadn't just withdrawn to their core worlds. They had left the galaxy entirely, taking their people, their knowledge, and their technology with them. The galaxy that had once been home to hundreds of thriving civilizations was now a collection of failing worlds and dying species. The Council, races that had ruled for centuries, were crumbling. The advanced technology that had connected distant stars was breaking down. The carefully maintained peace that had lasted for decades was shattered, and somewhere beyond the edge of known space, humanity was building something new. They had learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from those who would destroy you. The galaxy was finally free of human influence, just as the Council races had wanted. But freedom, they were learning, was not the same thing as survival. 5 years had passed since humanity vanished, and the galaxy was begging. Council Chairman Vextar stood on the bridge of his personal ship, staring at the invisible barrier that surrounded what had once been human space. His once proud uniform was dirty and torn. His ship was held together with spare parts and desperate repairs. The mighty Althari Empire had been reduced to a handful of struggling worlds. "Begin transmission," Vextar ordered, his voice hoarse from years of giving orders that no one followed anymore. The message he broadcast was nothing like the arrogant speeches he had once given in the council chambers. This was the plea of a broken man representing a dying civilization. "To humanity, wherever you are," Vextar began, "I am Vextar of the Althari people. I come before you not as a leader, but as a beggar. We were wrong. We were so very wrong." His voice cracked as he continued. "We betrayed you. We lied about you. We drove you away when we should have treasured your friendship. Our pride has cost us everything. Our people are dying. Our worlds are failing, and our civilization is collapsing." Tears ran down Vextar's face as he delivered the hardest words he had ever spoken. "We don't deserve your help. We don't deserve your mercy. But I'm asking for it anyway because we have nowhere else to turn. Please, if there's any compassion left in your hearts, please help us." The response came not from humans, but from their automated systems. The cold mechanical voice spoke in perfect Althari. "Your message has been recorded. No further communication is necessary." It was the same response that every species had received when they tried to contact humanity. Polite, final, and utterly without hope. As news of Vextar's failed plea spread across the galaxy, Other species began making their own desperate attempts to reach humanity, but each effort met with the same result. The situation became even more desperate when the Gethry homeworld finally fell to the expanding screaming void. Empress Zaralyn had managed to evacuate most of her people, but they had nowhere to go. Refugee ships filled with homeless Gethry drifted through space, begging other species for sanctuary. Most were turned away. The galaxy's resources were too stretched to help refugees when everyone was struggling to survive. In desperation, Zaralyn decided to try something that no one else had attempted. Instead of begging for mercy, she offered complete surrender. She flew her ship directly to the human barrier and broadcast a message that shocked the galaxy. To humanity, she said, I offer you the complete subjugation of the Gethry people. We will be your slaves, your servants, whatever you wish. We ask for nothing except the chance to exist. Please, just tell us what you want from us. To everyone's amazement, the human barrier opened and allowed her ship through. Hope flared across the galaxy. Perhaps humanity was finally ready to listen. But what Zaralyn found on the other side crushed that hope completely. Human space was empty. Not destroyed, not conquered, simply abandoned. The planets were still there, but the cities were dark. The orbital stations were powered down. The great shipyards where humanity had built their vessels were silent and cold. In the center of what had once been humanity's capital system, Zaralyn found a single automated beacon. It broadcast a message from Admiral So Young, recorded years earlier. If you are hearing this message, it means you have finally understood the magnitude of your mistake. But understanding is not enough. We gave you chances to build something beautiful together. You chose betrayal instead. We will not make that mistake again. The message continued with words that would haunt the galaxy for generations. We are not hiding in some distant star system, waiting for you to find us. We have left this galaxy entirely. We have gone beyond your reach, beyond your ability to hurt us again. When you have truly learned to value life over power, perhaps the universe will offer you another chance. But it will not come from us. Zaralyn returned to her people with the devastating news. Humanity was gone, not just from their space, but from the galaxy itself. The barrier around human territory wasn't protecting hidden colonies. It was protecting empty worlds, a monument to what the galaxy had lost. The revelation broke whatever hope remained among the struggling species. If humanity had left the galaxy entirely, then no amount of begging or pleading would bring them back. But some species refused to give up. The Kelroni, whose trade empire had once spanned dozens of systems, sent exploration fleets to the edges of the galaxy. They searched for any sign of where humanity might have gone, following rumors and half-glimpsed sensor readings. Intelligence Director Kilntar led these expeditions personally. Her ships found traces of human activity in the galactic rim. Abandoned mining operations, empty research stations, signs of a massive evacuation that had taken place over several years. They didn't just leave when they activated the barrier, Kilntar reported to the remnants of the Kelroni government. They had been planning this evacuation for decades. Every human facility beyond their core systems was systematically emptied and abandoned. The evidence suggested that humanity had spent years preparing for their eventual departure. They had quietly moved their people, their resources, and their technology beyond the galaxy's edge. When the final betrayal came, they were ready to leave completely. As the 7th year of humanity's absence began, the galaxy's condition had become critical. The screaming void had consumed nearly a quarter of known space. Piracy was rampant on the trade routes. Disease and famine were widespread. The once great civilizations of the Council races had been reduced to struggling city-states. The Malari, who had been humanity's allies, faced an impossible choice. Before leaving, the Uaid, humans had offered to evacuate them to wherever humanity was going. Half the Malari people had accepted and disappeared with the humans. The other half had chosen to stay and help the remaining galaxy survive. Elder Threnos, now ancient and frail, spoke for those who had remained. Our human friends offered us a place among the stars. but someone must stay to tend the garden they planted, even if we lacked their skill to make it bloom. The Malari had become the galaxy's unofficial peacekeepers, trying to maintain some semblance of order as everything fell apart around them. But they were a peaceful people, and their efforts could only do so much against the chaos. On the anniversary of humanity's departure, representatives from all the surviving species gathered in what remained of the council chambers. The great hall that had once hosted hundreds of delegates now held barely 50 representatives from the scattered remnants of galactic civilization. Vextar, now officially called Speaker for the Desperate, rather than Chairman, stood before the assembly and spoke words that no council leader had ever imagined saying. "We are dying," he said simply. "Our pride destroyed us. Our arrogance cost us everything. We drove away the only species that could have saved us, and now we face the consequences of our choices." He paused, looking around at the faces of species that had once ruled the galaxy, and now struggled to survive each day. "Perhaps this is justice," Vextar continued. "Perhaps we deserve to face extinction for what we did, but I still hope against all reason that somewhere in the vast universe, humanity remembers what we once meant to them, not as rivals or subjects, but as the imperfect beings they tried to help become something better." The chamber fell silent. There was nothing left to say, no plans left to make, no hope left to cling to. The galaxy had made its choice 7 years ago, and now it was living with the consequences. But in the silence of space, far beyond the edge of the galaxy, something stirred. Humanity had indeed gone beyond their former enemies' reach. But they had not forgotten the galaxy they left behind, and perhaps in time they would decide whether that galaxy deserved a second chance. 7 years had passed since humanity disappeared, and something strange was happening in the galaxy. It started small. A medical supply cache appeared in orbit around a Yelani colony world that was fighting a plague. No ship was seen delivering it. No message explained where it came from. The supplies were exactly what the colony needed, down to the specific medicines that worked against their particular strain of disease. Dr. Sil Anna, who had been watching her people die for months, stared at the supply containers in amazement. The medicines were human-made but more advanced than anything she remembered from the old days of cooperation. "How is this possible?" she asked her assistant. "The humans left years ago." On Althari Prime, a similar mystery occurred. Food shipments began appearing in the poorest districts always at night, always exactly where they were needed most. The packages bore no identification marks, but the food inside was nutritious and perfectly preserved. Young Kiralyn, who had grown up hearing her grandmother's stories about the kind humans who had once lived among them, began to suspect the truth. She was a scientist, one of the few Althari who still believed that knowledge was more important than power. "Someone is watching us," she told her friend Vorak, a young Kelroni engineer who shared her beliefs. "Someone who knows exactly what we need and when we need it." Vorak had noticed similar patterns. Broken machinery in his district had been mysteriously repaired overnight. Not fixed with fancy new parts, but carefully maintained using exactly the right components to make old systems work again. "If it's humans, why don't they show themselves?" Vorak asked. Kiralyn had been thinking about that question for weeks. "Maybe they're testing us," she said. "Maybe they want to see what we do with their help." Her theory proved correct when they noticed that the mysterious aid only continued for communities that used it to help others. Districts that hoarded the food or medicine found their supplies stopping. Areas that shared their unexpected bounty kept receiving more help. The pattern became clear across the galaxy. Anonymous aid appeared wherever it was needed most, but only for those who proved they had learned from their mistakes. The Gethri refugees, who had been sharing their meager resources with other displaced peoples, found their ships being quietly resupplied. The Bratak clans that had turned away from warfare to focus on farming received seeds and agricultural equipment. The Malari, who had spent years trying to hold the galaxy together, discovered their medical stations were being upgraded with advanced technology. But species and individuals who remained selfish or cruel found no help at all. The few remaining council loyalists who tried to rebuild their old empires discovered that their efforts constantly failed due to mysterious equipment malfunctions and supply shortages. Captain Wu Jin watched all of this from the bridge of his ship, the Quiet Thunder. His vessel was unlike anything that had existed in the old galaxy, sleek, advanced, and completely invisible to most sensors. He and his crew were part of humanity's new role, silent guardians of the galaxy they had abandoned. Target acquired, his sensor operator reported. Pirate fleet attacking a Malari hospital ship. Begin intervention, Wu Jin ordered calmly. The pirates never saw what hit them. Their weapons simply stopped working, their engines shut down, and their life support systems reduced to minimum power. They drifted helplessly as the hospital ship continued on its mission of mercy. Later, the pirates would find their ships repaired and functional again, but with a message burned into every display screen: choose mercy over cruelty or face the consequences. These interventions were becoming more frequent as word spread that something was protecting the innocent and punishing the wicked. Some people began to suspect that humanity had returned, but others dismissed this as wishful thinking. The truth was more complex than anyone realized. Humanity had indeed left the galaxy, but they had never stopped watching it. From their new home beyond the galactic rim, they had built a civilization unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Intelligence Officer Mi Kyung sat in an observation post that existed in a dimension slightly removed from normal space. From here, she could monitor the entire galaxy without being detected. Her job was to identify species and individuals who showed genuine change. The young ones are different, she reported to Admiral So Young during their weekly briefing. The generation that grew up after our departure. They remember the old stories about cooperation and kindness. They want to build something better. Admiral So Young studied the reports carefully. Humanity had spent 10 years building their new civilization in the void between galaxies, working alongside species that had also fled from oppression and tyranny. They had learned to create a society based on cooperation instead of domination. Are they ready? So Young asked. Mi Kyung considered the question carefully. Some of them are, not the old leaders, not the ones who betrayed us, but their children and grandchildren. They might be. The decision to reveal humanity's return came from an unexpected source. On the 10th anniversary of the Great Exodus, young beings from across the galaxy did something that surprised everyone. They built a memorial, led by Kira Lin and Vorak. Representatives from dozens of species worked together to construct a monument in the ruins of the old council chambers. It was a simple structure, but it bore inscriptions in hundreds of languages, all saying the same thing. To humanity, who tried to teach us wisdom and kindness, we were not ready to learn, but we are learning now. If you can hear us, please know that we remember what you gave us, and we are trying to become worthy of it. The memorial was broadcast across the galaxy, and the young beings who built it did something even more remarkable. They pledged to continue humanity's work, even without human guidance. They promised to protect the weak, to share their knowledge freely, and to choose cooperation over conflict. It was then that Admiral So Young made her decision. Prepare the fleet, she ordered. It's time to go home. The return of humanity was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ships appeared at the edge of every major system simultaneously, not the crude vessels that had left 10 years earlier, but sleek advanced craft that seemed to bend space around them. At the head of the fleet was Admiral So Young's flagship, now called the New Dawn. But she was not alone. Traveling with the human fleet were ships from dozens of species that the galaxy had never seen before, refugees from other galaxies who had joined humanity in their exile. The message that Admiral So Young broadcast to the galaxy was heard by every functioning communication system simultaneously. People of the galaxy, she began, we are the descendants of those who left 10 years ago. We return not as your saviors, not as your rulers, but as your neighbors. We have learned much in our time away, and we offer to share what we have learned. The broadcast continued with an offer that stunned everyone who heard it. We do not ask you to return to the old ways. The council is dead, and we will not resurrect it. Instead, we offer you something new, a chance to build a civilization based on cooperation instead of domination, on kindness instead of cruelty, on wisdom instead of power. But the offer came with conditions. Species that wanted to join this new galactic community would have to prove they had changed. They would need to show that they valued life over conquest, that they chose to help the weak instead of exploiting them. In the years that followed, a new kind of civilization emerged. It was not perfect. No civilization ever is. But it was built on the lessons learned from humanity's exile and the galaxy's dark age. The young beings who had built the memorial became the leaders of this new age. Kirillin established universities, where species could share knowledge freely. Vorak designed transportation systems that connected worlds without favoring the powerful over the weak. And in the depths of space, human monitoring stations kept their eternal watch. The quantum barriers that could isolate human space remained ready to activate at a moment's notice. Because humanity had learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the greatest act of mercy is being willing to walk away again if those lessons were forgotten. The galaxy had been given a second chance it never deserved. Whether it would prove worthy of that chance remained to be seen. But for the first time in 10 years, there was hope among the stars.